Elaine was his mother. Liam was her only son. And Rachel, the woman caught on camera dumping Elaine's pills, was the daughter-in-law she once called family. In court they sat together, while Elaine stood alone. She had funded their home, nursed their child, and trusted their promises. Now all she had was evidence, and a judge ready to listen. Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. She smiled and said I forgot again. But it was her hand that emptied the bottle. Elaine stood in front of the open medicine cabinet, her hands trembling, not from age, but from something more visceral. A knot tightened in her chest as her eyes scanned the shelf, then the drawer, then the counter. The bottle of her blood pressure medication, her daily necessity, was gone. Again. Maybe you took it twice this morning? Rachel's voice was sugar-laced and clipped at the edges like a curtain hiding rot. She stood in the hallway with a mug in hand, leaning against the doorframe in her lemon-yellow robe, watching Elaine as if she were a toddler playing house. You've been so forgetful lately. Elaine blinked at her, the silence thick as steam. No, she said evenly. I always count. I always check. Rachel's smile twitched. Well, it's probably around here somewhere. I'll help you look after breakfast. But she didn't. She never did. Elaine stood still long after Rachel walked away, listening to the clink of ceramic mugs in the kitchen, the hum of the coffee grinder, and the distant muffled laugh that came only when Liam was home. Her son, her only child, had become an echo of someone she once raised with warmth. Now he echoed someone else's tone. That night, when the house went quiet and the hallway lights dimmed to a soft amber glow, Elaine opened the drawer beneath her bed. From inside, she pulled out a small black box she hadn't touched in years. Inside, a hidden camera, the kind her brother once used in his antique shop to catch dishonest customers. It still worked. She didn't sleep that night, not really. Instead, she waited until the morning light crept through the blinds. While Rachel went on her morning walk, yoga mat in hand and earbuds in, Elaine placed the camera discreetly inside the linen closet with a clean line of sight to the hallway and cabinet. She angled it just above the shelf where her pills rested, now in a new bottle she had hidden behind cold compresses and gauze. Then she waited. Every sound became a possible clue, every creak in the hallway a cue. She took her meds privately now, counting each pill under breath, clicking each lid shut like a ritual. She said nothing, smiled at dinner, even when Rachel patronized her in front of Liam, joking about mom's little slips and pouring her water like she was made of glass. But Elaine was not glass. She was stone, weathered, cracked, but never broken. A week passed. Then it happened. Elaine rewound the footage with shaking fingers late at night. Her reading glasses slipped low on her nose as she squinted at the grainy grayscale screen. There, at exactly 3:17 p.m., Rachel entered the hallway while Elaine napped in her sunroom. She looked around once, then again. Her movements were casual, practiced. Her hand reached into the cabinet, pulled out the bottle. She twisted the lid. And then, without hesitation, she walked to the trash bin, lifted the lid, and tossed the pills behind it, letting them fall between the bin and the wall. Elaine paused the video. The breath she didn't realize she'd been holding came out in a sharp, dry exhale. In that moment, everything aligned. The misplaced medicine, the syrupy tone, the way Rachel insisted on reminding Liam how fragile his mother was, the unsubtle brochures that kept appearing, Top 10 assisted living communities near you. And more than anything, the smugness masked as concern, the weaponized sweetness. Elaine leaned back, the low hum of the monitor casting a pale glow on her lined face. She reached for her notebook, the one she had labeled months ago when things had begun to shift. "Document everything," it read in bold red letters. She flipped to a clean page and began to write. Later that night, while Rachel laughed at something on her phone and Liam scrolled in silence beside her, Elaine stepped outside under the stars, feeling the cold cut her skin with clarity. In her pocket was a flash drive. In her mind, a single line kept replaying. "Maybe you took it twice." "No, dear. You took it, and you'll give it all back." The next morning, Rachel finds Elaine unusually cheerful. She doesn't notice the hidden camera is gone, but across town, in a small gray office lined with diplomas and sealed files, an elder care attorney slips the flash drive into a desktop port and watches Rachel toss away the pills in slow motion. He leans back, taps his pen against the desk, and mutters, "Looks like we've got a case." Rachel served tea with too much honey and far too much control. The tea was warm, sweet, and smelled faintly of jasmine. But Elaine didn't drink it, not because she feared it was poisoned. No, that would have required more subtlety than Rachel was capable of. Instead, she left it untouched because it reeked of performance. Every stir of the spoon, every napkin neatly folded beside the cup, was another stage cue in Rachel's little play. "I added a touch of manuka," Rachel chirped, placing the porcelain cup a bit too close to Elaine's elbow. "It's supposed to be good for immunity. At your age, we need to think about those things, right?" Elaine smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't rise past the lips. "Kind of you," she murmured, without touching the cup. Rachel leaned in, her tone feather soft. "Did you find your keys, by the way? You seemed flustered this morning." Elaine nodded slowly, rehearsed. "They were in the laundry, I think." She knew exactly where they'd been, tucked inside the pantry cabinet behind the flour tin. She hadn't put them there. Later that day, Rachel cut Elaine's chicken into small, uneven chunks. The sound of the knife on porcelain scraped against Elaine's nerves. "There we go," Rachel said, sliding the plate toward her like a nurse feeding a toddler. "Don't want to chip a tooth. You always forget your dentures when you nap." Elaine had never worn dentures in her life. Liam, across the table, didn't look up from his phone. "She's just trying to help, Mom." Elaine said nothing. She was beginning to master the art of silence, using it not to retreat, but to sharpen her focus, to document, to collect. That night, she pretended to misplace her reading glasses, stumbled once on the step to the hallway, asked Rachel the same question twice, watched her reactions like a hawk in a cardigan. The sweetness crumbled fast. Rachel sighed loudly after each repeated question, tossed a dish rag onto the counter with exaggerated flair. One time, she muttered under her breath, "God help us if this turns into diapers." Elaine heard every word. She waited until midnight to enter the study. Carefully, methodically, she opened the locked file drawer where Rachel now kept household documents. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew if someone was plotting against her mind, they'd likely started on paper. There, buried between old utility bills and furniture warranties, she found it. Her medical file. At first, she thought it was a duplicate, but the date of her last appointment had been altered, her blood pressure reading falsified. In the notes section, someone had scribbled, "Episodes of confusion, monitor closely." Her chest tightened. She returned the file without a sound, locked the drawer, and walked away with fire blooming behind her eyes. By morning, the play resumed. Rachel laid out her vitamins in a little ceramic bowl next to a fresh smoothie and scrambled eggs. "Thought I'd help you with your morning routine," she said brightly. "Your memory's been, well, a little spotty." Elaine tilted her head. "Is it? I wouldn't know." Rachel chuckled. "That's kind of the point, isn't it?" Elaine smiled again. Tight, cold. "It is." When the mail came, Elaine sorted through it slowly, catalogs, bills, junk, and— her fingers paused. A thick envelope, glossy and colorful. Lakeside Elder Care Community. On the front, a tagline, "Because comfort shouldn't be confusing." Her name was printed neatly under the window. Elaine walked to the sunroom, sat down in the light, and slowly opened the brochure. Inside were pamphlets about memory wings, meal plans, shared rooms, and transitional housing. There was even a sticky note attached. "Rachel thought you might like this. Love." Liam. Elaine didn't react, not right away. But that evening, when Rachel called from the hallway, "Need help with your slippers again?" Elaine responded with deliberate calm. "No, dear. I remember exactly where I left them." And she did, right next to the second hidden camera she'd just installed behind the bookshelf. "They wanted me to feel small in the house I made possible." The click was subtle. Elaine twisted the brass handle on the pantry door again, gently, then harder. The key she'd used every morning for years, since the day she helped stock those shelves after escrow, refused to turn. She stared at the lock like it had personally betrayed her. "Need help with that?" Rachel's voice floated from the living room like a balloon full of acid. Elaine turned, cool and even. "Is the lock changed?" Rachel shrugged from the couch, one leg draped over the other like she owned the air. "Kyle thought it was safer that way. You know, to keep things organized. Don't worry, we'll label your section." Elaine didn't speak. She walked away slowly, each step a thread snapping in her chest. Later that day, while pretending to nap on the sunroom recliner, Elaine overheard Rachel talking to a friend on the phone. Laughter, wine clinks, and then, "She's basically a guest who overstayed. Once we get the medical thing documented, we can talk about assisted living options, guilt-free." Guest. The word echoed like a hammer striking porcelain. She could still hear it when she retreated to her bedroom and opened the old mahogany chest at the foot of her bed. Inside were mementos, photos, her wedding veil, and beneath a blue velvet pouch, a ring box. Empty. She had sold it 4 years ago. Her wedding ring, a white gold solitaire her late husband had chosen with trembling fingers and soft eyes. She'd pawned it quietly, no announcement, no dramatics, to scrape together the last $40,000 for Kyle and Rachel's down payment when the bank threatened foreclosure. Rachel had cried with gratitude then. Kyle had hugged her for 5 full seconds. Now she needed a label on the pantry just to get cereal. Elaine stood and pulled out the accordion file she'd kept buried beneath the winter linens. Original mortgage statements, wire transfer receipts, co-signed documentation of her 80% financial contribution, each one carefully dated and initialed. She slid them into a tote bag, grabbed her coat, and made the 10-minute walk to the UPS store. "Hi," she told the young clerk, her voice calm but low. "I need a new off-site safety box, something not connected to this address." The kid blinked. "Like a private mailbox?" Elaine smiled. "Yes, and a copy of everything I hand you. 2 sets. Color back at the house, Rachel and Kyle were curled on the couch watching something on Netflix. They barely looked up when she entered. Good. They were comfortable. And comfort, Elaine was learning, made people sloppy. That evening, she slipped into the hallway quietly, past their bedroom, past the laundry, until she heard the whisper of a voice. Rachel. Again. On the phone. "She slips up once, she's out." That's what the caseworker said. All it takes is forgetting the stove again, or a lost wallet, or maybe the car keys going missing. Then we can escalate it. Elaine stood very still. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. A silent, eerie chill rolled down the corridor, like the house itself knew it was being betrayed. Back in her room, she sat at her vanity and looked at herself. The faint lines, the tired eyes, the wisdom, the fury. A guest? In this house? Number She was the foundation beneath their feet, and they had mistaken her silence for surrender. She opened her phone and began recording voice notes, timestamps, interactions, contradictions. She titled the folder, Quiet Ownership. She looked at the reflection again. "Let's see who overstays," she whispered to the woman in the mirror. The next morning, Rachel breezed past Elaine at the breakfast table and said cheerfully, "We may have a home evaluator stop by next week. Just a heads up. Try not to stress, okay?" Elaine nodded, smiling faintly. But under the table, her hand clutched a manila folder with every page of the deed, highlighted and signed. And her eyes were wide open. I didn't need to scream. The footage would do that for me. The lens was no larger than a coat button. Elaine pressed the device gently into the carved notch she'd hollowed behind the ceramic vase on her bookshelf. The tiny green light blinked once, then disappeared into stillness. This one had audio. Motion activated, synced to a private cloud storage account under a name no one in that house could guess. It was the 3rd camera she'd installed. She didn't shake this time, not like she had the first. Something in her had solidified. She no longer felt like prey. She was evidence. Down the hallway, Rachel's laughter rang out, too loud, too sugar-slick. Elaine stepped back just in time to see her pass the door, phone in hand. I know. Rachel giggled to someone on the other end. But the woman thinks a calendar means independence. She can't even remember if she took her pills. A pause, then the words that snapped something cold into Elaine's spine. Let her skip a dose or two, it'll teach her. Elaine stood frozen, her breath slowed to a long, controlled inhale. Her hands didn't shake, her pulse didn't spike, but her smile, when Rachel peeked in and said, "All good, Mother Elaine?" was so calm it made Rachel blink. Elaine nodded. Lovely day. That night, she downloaded the clip. Then 2 more. One of Rachel pulling the battery from the pill organizer. Another of her opening Elaine's appointment letter and tossing it in the trash. By the weekend, she had 15 snippets. None longer than a minute, but each razor-sharp in truth. She uploaded them onto a flash drive. Then, early Monday morning, she stepped into a modest brick building labeled Sapphire Elder Advocacy and Rights Center. Inside, a receptionist named Janine listened with a practiced calm. Elaine placed the flash drive between them. "I don't want to press charges. Not yet. I just want someone watching." Janine looked up at her. "And someone is now. Starting today." Later that night, back at home, Rachel was in full social media mode. Elaine could hear her in the living room, performing with breathy concern on a video call. "It's just so hard, watching someone fade. You give and give, you try to help, but sometimes it feels like she's, I don't know, just gone. I hate to say it, but she's not the person she used to be." Elaine watched from the kitchen doorway, unseen, her arms crossed, her lips tight. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She just memorized the cadence of Rachel's tone, how it trembled at just the right syllable. That night she updated her camera's angle, just in case the story changed again. A few days later, she got a call from Sapphire's case investigator. "We've opened a preliminary review, Ms. Elaine," the woman said. "We need you to keep everything exactly the same. Same routines, same silence. The footage will build context. Her patterns will do the rest." Elaine nodded slowly. "You want me to act like nothing's happening?" "We want her to think she's still winning." Elaine looked out the window at Rachel's herb garden, the one she never let Elaine touch. Rosemary, thyme, basil, all green, all hers, for now. She hung up, then walked to the kitchen. "Morning," Rachel chirped, dressed in lemon-yellow linen, stirring her turmeric latte. "You're up early." Elaine smiled back. "Just couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of all the things I used to forget." Rachel laughed, not knowing that the punchline was already recorded. That night, Elaine found an envelope on her pillow. No note, no handwriting. Just a glossy pamphlet with bright blue lettering. "Silver Pines Assisted Living. Tranquility starts here." Her name was printed on the application, typed, ready. Elaine folded it once, slid it into her camera folder, and labeled the file, "Attempted relocation, documented." They locked the medicine cabinet. I had the keys to everything else. The click echoed louder than it should have. Elaine stood in the hallway, still in her robe, her toothbrush dangling in one hand, watching as Rachel stepped back from the hallway cabinet and casually twirled a small padlock key between her fingers. "Oh?" Rachel said, faking surprise. "We had to reorganize. You know how clutter stresses Liam out. The cabinet's locked now, just until we can figure out a safer system." Elaine blinked once. Her blood pressure monitor was inside that cabinet. So was her medication, her name on every label, each prescribed dosage tied to months of vitals logged meticulously, and now locked behind a door she no longer had access to. Rachel didn't wait for a response. She breezed past Elaine, humming under her breath, the sound of her slippered footsteps swallowed by the hallway rug. Elaine returned to her room with the toothbrush still in hand, unbrushed, but her mind was sharp, buzzing now like the static before a radio tune. She sat on the edge of her bed and opened her drawer. Inside, folded carefully beneath a paperback novel no one in the house had ever noticed her reading, was a manila envelope marked Split Refi Docs, 2016. She hadn't looked at them in years. Her fingers were steady now as she pulled the envelope open and slid out the contents. Mortgage agreement, notarized co-owner signature, Elaine S. Parker, 60%. Liam R. Parker, 40%. A half smile pulled at her lips. They thought she was locked out of a cabinet. She still owned the house. The next morning, while Rachel was at Pilates and Liam at work, Elaine called the county registrar's office. The woman on the line confirmed what Elaine already knew. Yep, you're still listed as a majority owner on the deed. Active, no transfers filed since the refinance 6 years ago. Elaine jotted it down. Can you mail me a certified copy? Of course. Should arrive within a few days. When she hung up, Elaine didn't celebrate. She simply opened her planner and crossed off one word in red ink: leverage. Then she drove herself to the law offices of Benjamin Tully and Ward, where she updated her will, quietly removing Liam from all real estate inheritance. She left his name nowhere, not even a single keepsake. Instead, she allocated her 60% stake into a private trust, one designed to protect elder homeowners from coercion or property abuse. The lawyer, a kind-eyed woman named Julia, studied the documents and murmured, "Smart woman. Most people your age don't think about backup plans. You've just made yourself fireproof." Elaine gave her a faint smile. "That's because I've already walked through the fire." That evening, she returned home to find Rachel in the kitchen, boiling water with exaggerated grace. "Oh, you're back," Rachel chirped. "I was going to leave you some ginger tea. Helps with, blood pressure." Elaine poured herself water instead. Rachel watched, her smile thinned. "You've been quiet lately." Elaine didn't blink. "You've been careless lately." Rachel's eyes flickered. "Excuse me?" "I saw the lock on my cabinet. I heard the phone call you made Monday, and I've been reading up on co-ownership law." Rachel's expression twitched, just slightly, but she recovered. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you misunderstood." Elaine interrupted. "You've been misusing the word guest for months, but guests don't hold property titles." Rachel's mouth opened and closed once. Then she turned on her heel and left the room without another word. Elaine didn't need her to say anything, not anymore. That night she paid cash for a burner phone at the gas station 2 towns over. Taped to the back was a sticky note from the clerk with her new number. She programmed only one contact into it: Julia, attorney. Then she placed the phone in a shoebox, tucked it into her closet behind a dusty quilt, and fell asleep that night with her door wedged shut. The next afternoon, while watering the gardenias in the front yard, Elaine paused at the sound of Rachel's voice through the open kitchen window. It was hushed, bitter, frantic. "She won't last long," Rachel snapped. "Soon she won't be our problem." Elaine didn't flinch. She placed the watering can on the soil, her gloved hand trembling just once. Then she reached into her pocket and clicked the voice recorder. It was already running. "They tried to lock me out. I carved out my own corner." The key slid into the lock like it had been waiting for her. Elaine turned it with a slow, deliberate click, then opened the weather-worn door to the garden unit, the modest back portion of the house that once served as Liam's workshop, and before that, a guest suite. Dust danced in the morning light streaming through the single window, and the scent of cedar storage boxes lingered faintly beneath layers of paint and mildew. It wasn't much, but it was hers now. She stepped inside, setting down a single suitcase and a shoebox labeled July 1979, Co-Ownership Docs. Behind her, the locksmith waited silently, his tool belt jingling faintly. "You want the keypad code private?" he asked. Elaine nodded. "Only I should know it." He installed the keypad on the new lock, tested it twice, then handed her the instructions. Elaine paid in cash, added a tip, and saw him out with a polite smile. "Retrofitting independence," she whispered to herself once the door closed. By evening, Elaine had scrubbed the kitchenette counters, unfolded fresh sheets over the twin bed, and set up a reading lamp next to her worn armchair. A framed photo of her late husband, Greg, sat on the makeshift nightstand, angled just so. She boiled tea. Chamomile. No sugar. The old unit smelled of lemon oil now, and defiance. When Liam finally noticed her absence and knocked on the garden unit's sliding door, she took her time opening it. "Mom?" He blinked at the setup behind her. Bed made, shelves dusted, her pill organizer on the side table, full and untouched. "I'm moving in here," she said simply. "You can't just do that." "I can," she said, lifting a single sheet of paper. "Co-ownership, remember? I have legal access to the property, every room including this one." He looked stunned. "Rachel said—" Elaine didn't let him finish. "Rachel says many things." His eyes dropped to the document in her hand, the one with their joint signatures, notarized, dated. Elaine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "This is no longer your concern, Liam," she said. "I have my space, and I'll keep it." Rachel's reaction came in the form of slamming drawers, storming footsteps, and a string of muttered accusations loud enough to echo through the garden windows. "She's dangerous. She's isolating herself. This is what happens before people go off the deep end. We can't let her just take over the house." Elaine sipped her tea and calmly wrote it all down in her notebook, every quote, every timestamp. By midweek, her garden unit had Wi-Fi, her own router installed under a new service in her name, and an internal camera discreetly hidden behind a potted aloe vera. Her doctor's number sat by the phone, her lawyer's contact was taped to the inside of her cabinet, and her medications locked inside her own small safe, one she'd owned since before Liam was born. 3 nights later, a knock interrupted her evening reading. Not the frantic pound of Rachel's tantrums. This knock was sharp, professional. She opened the door and found 2 individuals on the porch, ID badges clipped to their jackets. "Elaine Parker?" one asked. "We're from Adult Protective Services. We're here for an unannounced wellness check." Behind them, Rachel stood stiffly in the hallway, arms folded, eyes gleaming with feigned concern. Elaine smiled warmly. "Come in, officers." As they stepped into her garden suite, the first APS agent paused, eyes sweeping the room. Fresh linens, organized meds, ownership papers framed on the wall. Elaine handed them a flash drive. "What's this?" one asked. She looked over his shoulder at Rachel and said gently, "My side of the story." And then she closed the door. They thought they'd win the narrative, but the visitor saw right through them. The living room looked deceptively warm, sunlight spilling across a vase of forced tulips, the faint scent of lemon-scented wood polish lingering in the air, but the tension sat thick, sour, and motionless. Even the air felt hesitant. Elaine sat straight-backed in her armchair, legs crossed neatly, a tray of lemon cookies untouched beside her. Across from her, 2 representatives from Adult Protective Services reviewed a manila folder thick with printouts, photographs, and 1 USB drive labeled in handwritten ink. Footage, April to June. Rachel leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed tight, a smile too wide plastered on her face. "Of course you understand. Elderly minds can get easily confused. I try my best, but it's hard managing both work and care." The older woman from APS didn't look up from the document in her lap. "Ms. Elaine Parker is listed as co-owner of the property, correct?" Rachel's smile twitched. "Oh, technically, yes, but that was years ago. It was just to qualify for the loan. She's not actually—" "Legally, co-ownership implies equal residential rights, regardless of age." Rachel swallowed. Elaine, without a word, reached into the side pocket of her floral cardigan and pulled out her reading glasses. She placed them carefully on her nose, opened a slim folder, and slid a page across the coffee table. "My latest blood pressure readings," she said, voice calm but laced with steel, compared to 2 months prior. The second APS rep, a younger man with close-cropped hair, leaned forward and scanned the graphs. His eyes widened slightly. "You've had a significant spike in systolic numbers." Elaine nodded. "Correlated exactly to the weeks Rachel handled my medications?" Rachel let out a forced laugh. "Handled? I was helping. She gets forgetful. Sometimes she takes them twice." The older APS rep now raised her head. "We've reviewed the footage, Ms. Reynolds." A full beat of silence. Rachel's face flushed red. "What footage?" Elaine's eyes didn't blink. "The one where you dumped my pills behind the trash bin, 3 nights in a row." The tray of lemon cookies sat between them, a silent peace offering from a woman who was done playing nice. Liam entered from the hallway, looking like he hadn't shaved in days. His voice was tight. "Rachel, what the hell is this?" "Don't," she snapped. "You weren't here." I saw the footage too, Rachel. The APS worker nodded once, confirming, given the evidence and your ongoing manipulation, including forged brochures and altered prescriptions, this household will now be marked for formal investigation. Rachel Reynolds, your actions have triggered a mandatory inquiry into elder abuse. Rachel backed away from the island. This is insane. She's doing this on purpose. She wants us out. Elaine stood now, steady, still. Her voice, however, cut through the air with the precision of a scalpel. You wanted to teach me a lesson, Rachel, about dependence, about silence, about knowing when my time was up. She paused, hands steady at her sides. Let me return the favor. Later that evening, after the APS team left, Rachel stormed around the house like a caged animal. Liam sat in the dimmed dining room, nursing a glass of water and shame. Elaine had already returned to her garden unit, where fresh chamomile steeped in a ceramic cup. The door was locked. Her camera light blinked softly. The wind shifted, the quiet of justice settling in. The next morning, a white envelope lay on the main doorstep. Rachel ripped it open, eyes darting. Her breath hitched. A court summons. Elaine Parker vs. Rachel Reynolds. Hearing on fraud, medical neglect and cohabitation rights. Mandatory appearance required. Rachel dropped the paper. Elaine, from behind her garden window, watched her kneel, and for once Rachel was the one who looked confused. They brought paperwork. I brought proof. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in mood. Polished floors, sterile walls, and the low hum of an overworked ventilation system gave the space a sense of practiced indifference. No sympathy, no comfort, just process. Elaine sat in the front row beside her attorney, back straight, hands folded calmly in her lap. Her silver hair was neatly pinned. A navy blue shawl hung over her shoulders like armor. She didn't flinch when Rachel walked in with her own lawyer, dragging Liam like an afterthought behind her. Rachel wore a soft blush blouse, as if she were auditioning for a role titled Innocent Daughter-in-Law. Her lips quivered just enough to seem fragile, but Elaine had seen that mouth curled in venom too many times to be fooled. All rise, the bailiff called. The judge, a compact woman with cropped hair and half-moon glasses, entered swiftly. We're here today for a preliminary hearing on the matter of elder mistreatment and property rights. Ms. Parker, Ms. Reynolds, your counsel may begin. Rachel's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client is the victim of a grave misunderstanding. Ms. Parker is advanced in age and has recently shown signs of cognitive decline. Rachel has been managing her medications, her schedule, and her daily routines for the past year. She has only ever acted with care and concern. Rachel dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue. Not a single tear followed. Elaine's lawyer stood. No grand gestures, just calm, rehearsed precision. Your Honor, may we approach the bench and submit our exhibits? The judge motioned them forward. The USB stick slid across the surface like a bullet, small but packed with impact. Video surveillance, dated and time-stamped, audio included. The judge plugged it into the monitor. The courtroom dimmed as the footage played on the screen above. There was Rachel, clear as crystal, pouring pills into her palm, tossing them behind the trash bin. There was her voice. Let her skip a dose or two. Maybe she'll remember who's in charge. Gasps. One from the clerk, one from the back row where a social worker sat scribbling notes. Rachel stood up, hands shaking now for real. That footage is taken out of context. The judge raised a hand. Sit down, Miss Reynolds. Your voice isn't helping. Elaine didn't look at Rachel. Her eyes remained on the judge. Ms. Parker, the judge said gently, do you have any additional documentation? Elaine nodded once. Her attorney handed over medical receipts, doctor's reports showing sudden drops in vitals, and printouts of altered medication logs. The judge flipped through them in silence, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Rachel. Given the evidence provided and the credibility of the documentation, this court will escalate the matter to a full hearing. Charges under review include fraudulent caregiving, elder neglect, and cohabitation exploitation. Rachel's carefully curated face cracked like thin porcelain. This is ridiculous, she hissed. She's just waiting to die and take everything with her. The room went still. Elaine tilted her head slightly. "If I were dying," she said coolly, "I'd make sure I didn't leave a single thing behind for vultures." The judge tapped her gavel once. "Enough." As the courtroom cleared, Elaine remained seated. Her lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Would you like to move forward with the buyout motion?" Elaine didn't hesitate. "File it." Every square foot from the back of the room, Rachel stared as her lawyer took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. She knew then, this wasn't just a court case, it was a reckoning. They whispered about options. I was busy closing them. Elaine sat at the edge of her garden unit's couch, a small pen in one hand and a stack of itemized listings in the other. Each was labeled in perfect cursive: silver tea set, 1964 wedding gift, grandfather clock, appraised, mahogany jewelry box, top drawer only. The items weren't just things, they were chapters. But Elaine knew when to close a book. She circled a final piece. Sell. Her lawyer had called that morning, voice steady but laced with quiet satisfaction. "We're ready to file for forced sale. Partition law is in your favor. They can't block it." Elaine didn't smile. She simply said, "Let me know the date." Meanwhile, just above her, where the air always seemed a little colder, Rachel paced the hallway barefoot. Her voice leaked through the ceiling vents like steam under pressure. "They can't just sell it out from under us, Liam." "She owns more than half," Liam muttered. "You knew that." "Don't turn this around on me. You let her stay. I said we should have moved her to that care place months ago." Elaine pressed a small remote in her palm, muting the intercom she had discreetly installed during her locksmith's visit. She didn't need to hear their panic. She could feel it in the silence that came afterward. By the end of that week, the silver tea set was gone. Then the antique floor mirror. The desk her husband once used was picked up by a young couple who thanked Elaine like she was passing them a torch. She nodded politely, offering nothing more than, "Make good memories." In the attic, she found the untouched envelope her husband had once hidden after refinancing the house. It had a single note written in his blocky print: "If they ever forget what you're worth, remind them who signed first." Elaine took a photo of it with her phone and slipped it into her drawer. Downstairs, Rachel was on a different mission. She stood at the kitchen table with a forged form in front of her, Elaine's name printed neatly, a shaky version of Elaine's signature scrawled below. "Are you sure this'll work?" Liam asked. "If it gets processed before she notices, the policy will name me. We'll have funds to fight the auction, or buy her out." Liam looked nauseous, but didn't object. That was his new specialty, silent approval. Rachel mailed the form that afternoon, dropping it into the post box with the flair of someone tossing confetti. What she didn't know was that Elaine had been alerted. A fraud flag had been placed on her file months ago at the request of her bank's elder services liaison. Any signature submission triggered a review and an automated alert. At 2:07 p.m., Elaine received the call. "Mrs. Parker, we received an insurance form today. Something looks off." Elaine paused at her kitchen sink, letting the water run over her fingertips. "Hold the file," she said. "I'll call the fraud unit directly." She hung up and walked to her safe. Slowly, methodically, she pulled out her legal signature card, snapped a photo, and uploaded it to her lawyer and the bank. In less than an hour, the form was flagged, frozen, and reported. The same mail truck that had carried Rachel's deceit now hummed away with a very different delivery, one addressed to the state attorney's office. That evening, the house was unusually quiet. Elaine made herself a cup of chamomile tea. She walked the garden alone, stars blinking softly above, night air cool on her cheeks. When she passed her own window, she caught her reflection. Not frail, not forgetful, formidable. The next morning, a manila envelope was waiting at her garden door. Inside was a scan of the forged document. Across the top, the bank had written in red, "Forgery confirmed. Fraud unit notified." Elaine folded it neatly and whispered to herself, "Time to turn the page." She mocked my pen tremble. I used that same hand to sign her out. Elaine's fingers shook slightly as she held the pen, but not from weakness. It was control. Control over every line, every signature, every move that brought her to this exact moment. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the polished walls of the county courthouse annex, sharp as a bell. Elaine sat in the back, posture steady, her face calm behind a pair of tinted glasses. She wasn't listed as a bidder. That honor belonged to the man 2 rows ahead, a quiet real estate proxy who knew better than to ask questions. Across the aisle, Rachel sat stiff and flushed. Her hair was hastily straightened, but the split ends flickered in the fluorescent lighting like frayed nerves. Liam looked even worse. Dark circles carved under his eyes like trenches, sweat blooming at the collar of his department store shirt. The auction began. The house Elaine had helped pay for. The one her wedding ring had been sold to save. The one she was slowly pushed out of, inch by cruel inch. The opening bid came low. Rachel's hand shot up. $290,000. A beat. Elaine's proxy raised 2 fingers. $305,000. Rachel scowled. Her voice rang tight. $310,000. Elaine didn't flinch. She nodded. $325,000? Rachel glanced at Liam, who whispered, "We're near the edge." She raised again. $330,000. The auctioneer barely looked up. "We have $330. Do I hear $340? Elaine didn't nod this time. She blinked once, deliberate. $350,000, the proxy said, clear and cold. Silence. Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came. Liam leaned toward her. "They flagged us. The loan didn't clear." Rachel stiffened. "You said." "I said it might." "Going once," the auctioneer snapped. "Going twice." Rachel lunged up, almost panicked. "We'll match it." The auctioneer hesitated, looked at the file in his hand, then frowned. "Bidder 17 has no verified financing on file. Final call?" Elaine's breath stayed measured, controlled, like every step she'd taken in the last 6 months. "Sold. To bidder 03. Congratulations." A single clap echoed from the back of the room. A woman in a gray suit nodded toward Elaine. No smile, just respect. Rachel's face contorted into something between disbelief and rage. She turned toward Elaine. "You did this on purpose." Elaine stood slowly. "No, Rachel. You did." Rachel stepped forward. "You won't get away with this. You think people won't see what you're doing?" Elaine pulled a folded letter from her purse. "The county already has, so the court. And so will the sheriff, when your 60 days run out." Liam put a hand on Rachel's arm, trying to pull her back. But she wouldn't budge. "You're a bitter old woman with too much time and too many lawyers." Elaine's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "And you're a young woman who underestimated the hands that built your foundation." With that, she turned. Her cane tapped softly on the polished floor as she exited, step by deliberate step, leaving behind echoes, whispers, and a legacy signed in silence. 45 days later, a for sale sign came down. A new deed was recorded, and 2 moving trucks pulled away from the house at opposite ends of the cul-de-sac. Elaine watched them from her garden unit window, sipping mint tea. The citrusy scent of lemon verbena danced in from the planter beside her. She had already changed the locks. She had already changed the story. By sunset, the house was hers. Legally, practically, poetically. She returned to the main house that night, walking from room to room like a curator reclaiming a museum after years of mislabeling. The light switches remembered her touch. The fireplace still cracked in the same rhythm. Even the air felt warmer, until the envelope arrived. No stamp, no name, just slipped under the front door while she was upstairs hanging curtains. She picked it up, the paper unmarked except for a single line typed in bold, "You won't be safe alone." Her hands didn't shake this time. She carried the note to her desk, snapped a photo, placed it in a new folder marked contingency, and sent it to her lawyer with one line. "Add to file. Security to be upgraded." Elaine lit her hallway lamp, the glow painting gold against newly polished floors. She whispered under her breath as she looked toward the front door. "Let them come knocking. They threatened my peace. I doubled my protection." The note still sat in Elaine's top drawer, unopened since the day she photographed it, but she didn't need to look at the words again. They were burned into her mind like smoke on old curtains. "You won't be safe alone." She'd read threats before. She'd lived through worse. But now, She had the deed, the footage, and something else Rachel had underestimated: time. The next morning, she made 3 calls. First, to a private security company. "Yes," she said, "I want cameras, every entrance, back and front, motion-triggered floodlights too, and a monitored panic button in my bedroom." Second, to her lawyer. The threat wasn't signed, but the tone felt familiar. And finally, to the florist. "Send lilies to the assisted living center, room 205, for Margaret Delaney." Rachel's mother. Elaine had learned long ago that cruelty, like mold, often started in the walls long before it reached the air. By noon, the house was transforming again. A technician installed a sleek camera doorbell, wiring in silence while Elaine steeped tea. The scent of lemon balm drifted through the kitchen. It wasn't fear she felt. It was vigilance, dressed in calm. She stood outside watching as the final light was screwed into place above the garden entrance. The air was brisk, crisp, like a page waiting for its final paragraph. That's when the sedan pulled up. It wasn't Rachel's. This one was navy, clean, driven with quiet fury. The window rolled down, and from it emerged a face Elaine recognized only from Christmas cards and tagged photos: Rachel's sister, Emily. She stepped out and didn't even close the door behind her. "I hope you're proud," she snapped. "You've ruined her." Elaine didn't move. Her voice, soft but unwavering, met the accusation head-on. "Number Rachel ruined herself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see. She's jobless, humiliated. Can't walk into a coffee shop without people whispering." "Then maybe," Elaine said, "she should have thought twice before turning medication into manipulation." Emily took a step forward, like she expected Elaine to back up. Elaine didn't. "I came here to ask, was it worth it?" Emily's voice cracked, just barely. "All this?" Elaine tilted her head. "Protecting myself? Reclaiming my dignity? Yes, every ounce of it." Emily's eyes flared, but she said nothing, just got back in her car and slammed the door. Elaine watched the taillights disappear down the street, then turned back to her gate. The security system chirped softly, accepting her code like a butler opening a velvet rope. Inside, the silence was serene. Not empty. Earned. She brewed another cup of tea. Her husband's portrait still hung by the entryway, his soft eyes seeming to nod in quiet approval. She whispered to the frame, "Remember when you said kindness isn't blindness? You were right. It's knowing when to close the door." The doorbell rang. The camera feed blinked on automatically. This time, it was no relative. Just a courier in khakis, holding a padded envelope. Elaine accepted it with a polite nod, even as her stomach tensed. The return address was legal. A firm from across a